Single parenting. An individual may acquire single parent status as a result of a divorce, separation, death of a spouse, or birth or adoption of a child. Although divorce rates have stabilized, the number of single parent households continues to rise. In 2016, 32% of single parent families had incomes below the poverty line. In addition, 35% of children younger than 18 years of age lived in single parent families, and the majority of single parents were women. Unfortunately, children raised in female-headed households are more likely to drop out of school, be a teen parent, and experience divorce in adulthood. Although some women are single parents by choice, most never planned on being single parents and may feel pressure to marry or remarry. Managing shortages of money, time, and energy is often a concern for single parents. Studies repeatedly confirm the financial difficulties of single parent families, particularly single mothers. In fact, the stigma of poverty may be more keenly felt than the discrimination associated with being a single parent. These families are often forced by their financial status to live in communities with inadequate housing and personal safety concerns. Single parents often feel guilty about the time spent away from their children. Divorced mothers, from marriages in which the father assumed the role of breadwinner and the mother the household maintenance and parenting roles, have considerable difficulty adjusting to their new role of breadwinner. Many single parents have trouble arranging for adequate childcare, particularly for a sick child. Social supports and community resources needed by single parent families include healthcare services that are open on evenings and weekends, high quality childcare, respite childcare to relieve parental exhaustion and prevent burnout, and parent enhancement centers for advancing education and job skills, providing recreational activities, and offering parenting education. Single parents need social contacts separate from their children for their own emotional growth and that of their children. Parents Without Partners is an organization designed to meet the needs of single parents. Single fathers. Fathers who have custody of their children have many of the same problems as divorced mothers. They feel overburdened by the responsibility, depressed, and concerned about their ability to cope with the emotional needs of the children, especially girls. Some fathers lack homemaking skills. They may find it difficult at first to coordinate household tasks, school visits, and other activities associated with managing a household alone. Parenting in reconstituted families. In the United States, many children living in homes where parents have divorced will experience another major change in their lives, such as the addition of a step-parent or new siblings. The entry of a step-parent into a ready-made family requires adjustments for all family members. Some obstacles to the role adjustments in family problem solving include disruption of previous lifestyles and interaction patterns, complexity in the formation of new ones, and lack of social supports. Despite these problems, most children from divorced families want to live in a two-parent home. Cooperative parenting relationships can allow more time for each set of parents to be alone to establish their own relationship with the children. Under ideal circumstances, power conflicts between the two households can be reduced, and tension and anxiety can be lessened for all family members. In addition, the children's self-esteem can be increased, and there is greater likelihood of continued contact with grandparents. Flexibility, mutual support, and open communication are critical in successful relationships in step-families and step-parenting situations. Parenting in dual-earner families. No change in family lifestyle has had more impact than the large numbers of women moving away from the traditional homemaker role and entering the workplace. The trend toward increased numbers of dual-earner families is unlikely to diminish significantly. As a result, the family is subject to considerable stress as members attempt to meet often competing demands of occupational needs and those regarded as necessary for a rich family life. Working mothers. Working mothers have become the norm in the United States. Maternal employment may have variable effects on preschool children's health. The quality of childcare is a persistent concern for all working parents. Determinants of childcare quality are based on health and safety requirements, responsive and warm interaction between staff and children, developmentally appropriate activities, trained staff, limited group size, age-appropriate caregivers, adequate staff-to-child ratios, and adequate indoor and outdoor space. Nurses play an important role in helping families to find suitable sources of childcare and to prepare children for this experience. Kinship care. Since the 1980s, the proportion of children in out-of-home care placed with relatives has increased rapidly. More than 2.7 million U.S. children are raised by grandparents or other kin at some time in their lives. According to the U.S. Census Bureau data, kinship caregivers are more likely to be poor, single, older, less educated, and unemployed than families in which at least one parent is present. Foster parenting. The term foster care is defined as placement in an approved living situation away from the family of origin. The living situation may be an approved foster home, possibly with other children, or a pre-adoptive home. Each state provides a standard for the role of foster parent and a process by which to become one. These parents contract with the state to provide a home for children for a limited duration. Most states require about 27 hours of training before being on contract and at least 12 hours of continuing education a year. Foster parents may be required to attend a foster parent support group that is often separate from a state agency. Each state has guidelines regarding the relative health of the prospective foster parents and their families, background checks regarding legal issues for the adults, personnel interviews, and a safety inspection of the residence and surroundings. Foster homes include both kinship and non-relative placements. Since the 1980s, the proportion of children in out-of-home care placed with relatives has increased rapidly and been accompanied by a decrease in the number of foster families. As with their non-foster counterparts, much of the child's adjustment depends on the family's stability and available resources. Even though foster homes are designed to provide short-term care, it is not unusual for children to stay for many years. Nurses should be aware that 700,000 children spend time living in foster care in a given year, many of them facing developmental concerns. Children from lower income single mother and mother partner families are considerably more likely to be living in foster care. Children in foster care tend to have a higher than normal incidence of acute and chronic health problems and may experience feelings of isolation or confusion. Foster children are often at risk because of their previous caretaking environment. Nurses should strive to implement strategies to improve the health care for this group of children. In particular, assessment and case management skills are required to involve other disciplines in meeting their needs. Socio-cultural influences on children and families. A child and his or her immediate family are nested within a local community of school, peers, and extended family, within a larger community that may be bound by a common geography, background, and traditions, and within an even broader community that incorporates the social, political, and economic elements that influence many aspects of family life. These layers of influence are often multifactorial. Parents, extended family, and community exert influence most directly when thinking about the religious or ethnic background of the family. These elements come into play when we think about children moving into the wider world, such as their interface with other children at school, or potential biases a child or adolescent may face because of religious or ethnic and racial identity. Thus, the socio-political context, though an outer layer of a social ecologic model, can exert enormous influence on a child's daily life opportunities and outcomes. Equally important to child and family health outcomes, the socio-political context draws our attention to factors and health policies at the local, regional, state, and federal levels that can serve as barriers to health equity. This is also made evident through research on the social determinants of health. The next section of the chapter will delve into a deeper discussion of such factors. The social ecologic model, rooted in Bronfenbrenner's ecologic model, offers a perspective of viewing children and their families within the context of various circles of influence, called an ecologic framework. This framework posits that individuals adapt in response to changes in their surrounding environments, whether that be the environment of the immediate family, the school, the neighborhood in which the family lives, or the socioeconomic forces that may shape job availability in their geographic area. In addition, Kazak argues that a person's behavior results from the interaction of his or her traits and abilities with the environment. No single factor can explain the totality of a child and his or her family's health behaviors. Children possess their own factors that influence their behavior, i.e., personal history or biologic factors. In turn, they are surrounded by relationships with family, friends, and peers who influence their behavior. Children and their families are then situated within a community that establishes the context in which social relationships develop. Finally, wider socio-cultural factors influence whether a behavior is encouraged or prohibited, e.g., social policy on smoking, cultural norms of mothers as primary caregivers of young children, media that can influence how a teenager thinks or he or she should look. Promoting the health of children requires a nurse to understand social, cultural, and religious influences on children and their families. The U.S. population is constantly evolving. Patients experience negative health outcomes when social, cultural, and religious factors are not considered as influencing their health care. Educating healthcare providers is one way to reduce disparities in healthcare. Influences in the surrounding environment, school communities, school health, and school connectedness. Environments differentially support learning through the kinds of opportunities and support provided. Learning and development are cumulative and synergistic, one supports the other. High quality early childhood education is especially beneficial to set children up for success in early grades. This is especially true for children from disadvantaged backgrounds. Access to this high quality education is key, yet occurs along a socioeconomic gradient. More highly resourced children attending higher quality preschool programs. Within communities, schools are important sites for health promotion. Initiatives such as the CDC sponsored Whole School, Whole Community, Whole Child model emphasize and build on this critical connection between youth academic performance and health by addressing important elements of children's and adolescents' lives that cut across domains. Examples of such elements include physical education and activity, nutritional environment, counseling, psychological and social services, social and emotional climate, physical environment, family engagement, community involvement. This approach acknowledges the need for multifaceted strategies to improve academic and health outcomes. It situates school not only as a place to learn, but also as a place to practice positive health behaviors and health promotion skills. For example, a nutritional health environment constructed in a way to promote child and adolescent health gives youth a chance to live out these skills by making healthy food choices available, by weaving nutrition education into the health curriculum, and by including supportive messaging about healthy nutrition in the school environment. The CDC and the World Health Organization identified place-based settings that contribute to individual, family, and population health, including educational settings. Thus, schools and early childhood centers can contribute to the health of children by teaching about health and healthy behaviors, and also by offering ways to enact healthy behaviors, e.g., physical education, coordinated social or mental health services, healthy snacks. This position addresses potential gaps in care or assessment for children and adolescents because place-based care can improve access for many children and emphasizes coordination among services in a given neighborhood. An important concept when considering schools as a site of health promotion is connectedness. School connectedness is defined as students' perception that they and their learning matter to the adults at their school and to their peers. It occurs when youth believe that their teachers, staff, and peers care about them academically and personally. The growth and implementation of this concept into educational practice stems from research indicating greater impact on youth health through bolstering protective factors that help children and adolescents avoid risky or unhealthy behaviors. This focus on strengths and promoting positive choices may also help buffer the impact of negative events on children and their health. Feeling connected at school has important health benefits. Children and youth who feel more connected are more likely to engage in healthy behaviors and do well academically. School connectedness has been found to be particularly protective against substance abuse, early sexual debut, and violence in both boys and girls. In addition, school connectedness was second only to family connectedness in protection against emotional distress, disordered eating, and suicidal ideation and attempts. Finally, in addition to health outcomes, it promotes academic outcomes, including improved grades, decreased absence, and delayed dropout. Recommended strategies for achieving school connectedness include effective training for teachers and staff to create positive learning environments, opportunities for families to become involved in the process and associated training, and provision of important academic, emotional, and social skills to students, and addressing barriers to achieving these skills so that students can feel engaged and have a stake in their education. Schools. When children enter schools, their radius of relationships extends to include a wider variety of peers and a new source of authority. Although parents continue to exert the major influence on children, in the school environment, teachers have the most significant psychological impact on children's development and socialization. In addition to academic and cognitive progress, teachers are concerned with the emotional and social development of the children in their care. Both parents and teachers act to model, shape, and promote positive behavior, constrain negative behavior, and enforce standards of conduct. Ideally, parents and teachers work together for the benefit of the children in their care. Schools serve as a major source of socialization for children. Next to the family, schools exert a major force in providing continuity and passing down culture from one generation to the next. This, in turn, prepares children to carry out the social roles they are expected to assume as they develop into adults. School is the center of cultural diffusion, wherein the cultural standards of the larger group are disseminated into the community. It governs what is taught and, to a great extent, how it is taught. School rules and regulations regarding attendance, authority relationships, and the system of rewards and penalties based on achievement transmit to children the expectations of the adult world of employment and relationships. School is an important institution in which children systematically learn about the negative consequences of behavior that departs from social expectations. School also serves as an avenue for children to participate in the larger society in rewarding ways, to promote social mobility, and to connect the family with new knowledge and services. Like parents, teachers are responsible for transmitting knowledge and culture, i.e., values on which there is a broad consensus, to the children in their care. Teachers are also expected to stimulate and guide children's intellectual development and creative problem solving. Peer cultures. Peer groups also have an impact on the socialization of children. Peer relationships become increasingly important and influential as children proceed through school. In school, children have what can be regarded as a culture of their own. This is even more apparent in unsupervised playgroups because the culture in school is partly produced by adults. During their lives, children are subjected to many influential factors, such as family, religious community, and social class. In peer group interactions, they confront a variety of these sets of values. The values imposed by the peer group are especially compelling because children must accept and conform to them to be accepted as members of the group. When the peer values are not too different from those of family and teachers, the mild conflict created by these small differences serves to separate children from the adults in their lives and to strengthen the feeling of belonging to the peer group. Although the peer group has neither the traditional authority of the parents nor the legal authority of the schools to teach information, it manages to convey a substantial amount of information to its members, especially on taboo subjects such as sex and drugs. Children's need for the friendship of their peers brings them into an increasingly complex social system. Through peer relationships, children learn to deal with dominance and hostility and to relate with persons in positions of leadership and authority. Other functions of the peer subculture are to relieve boredom and to provide recognition that individual members do not receive from teachers and other authority figures. Community. Families and communities are often interwoven in their impact on child health. Although both are essential to socio-emotional growth and improved learning outcomes in children, their influence on children is synergistic. When families live in areas of concentrated poverty, residents experience risk at population and individual levels. Children and families living in areas of concentrated poverty are at risk for negative health outcomes and experience higher rates of crime and violence. In addition, affected neighborhoods are more likely to have low-performing schools, limited access to high-quality preschool, and diminished school readiness, and poorer overall education outcomes. If parents have grown up in the area or a similar area, they have also experienced untoward effects on their health or educational outcomes. As a result, they may not be able to secure employment that provides greater resources for them to invest in their child, or that provides economic stability for the family. Financial stressors in parents contribute to their stress and depression, which can inhibit effective parenting. Thus, we see an important need for two-generation programs or strategies to both build on family and community strengths and diminish their stressors. Community-level factors are especially important as we consider the life, safety, and causes of death in older adolescents. For example, 75% of teen deaths are attributed to accidents, homicide, and suicide, and community-level factors such as violence, drug use, and alcohol use influence this number. Broader influences on child health, social media and mass media. Digital technologies that serve as an avenue to mass and social media are pervasive in most parts of American society. Technology has a role in the lives of children more than ever before. The American Academy of Pediatrics found that children younger than 5 years of age, across socioeconomic levels, use digital technology daily and are frequently targeted by advertisers. This frequent use carries risks for increased rates of obesity, disrupted sleep, and delays in cognitive, social, and language development, potentially related to diminished parent-child interaction in preschoolers. Research has demonstrated that there is limited benefit of digital technology for children younger than 2 years of age, also likely related to diminished parent-child interaction. Benefits of digital technology use are related to the type of content viewed and used. For example, high-quality programming such as Sesame Street can bolster cognitive and social outcomes in preschool-age children, and applications from similar organizations, e.g. PBS or Sesame Workshop, can promote literacy skills. Unfortunately, many programs and applications targeted to children and their parents or caregivers are not created under the direction of educators or developmental experts and may not prove as beneficial to child social and cognitive outcomes. In addition, less than 30% of children from lower-income homes view high-quality digital media, perpetuating potential risks posed by the technology and associated disparities. Despite technologic advances, play, social interactions with peers, and parent-child interactions remain vital to young children's development of the skills needed to succeed in school, including persistence, emotional regulation, and creative thinking. The digital landscape for older children and adolescents seems to change and grow on a daily basis and is woven into daily life for many youth. Indeed, recent research indicates that nearly 75% of adolescents have a smartphone or mobile technology device, and approximately half report feeling addicted to their phone. While using these mobile devices, most adolescents are engaging in social media, with nearly 3/4 engaging in multiple social media sites and cultivating a portfolio. This immersion poses both benefits and risks to these youth. In terms of the benefits, youth have an unprecedented chance to learn, gather information, and consider new perspectives. To connect with other youth, which is especially important for youth who may feel marginalized or isolated, and to maintain connections with family and friends who live at a distance. On the other hand, navigating this landscape includes potential risks to physical and mental health, such as obesity, disrupted sleep, addictive behavior, negative impact on academics, bullying and sexual exploitation, and normalization of maladaptive behavior, e.g., sites that promote disordered eating or self-harm. Similar to traditional forms of media, e.g., television, research has demonstrated that social media postings can influence perceptions of alcohol and drug use and younger age of initiating sexual activity as normal in the eyes of adolescents. Traditional forms of mass media, such as television and movies, can reify gender and racial stereotypes, thus perpetuating negative mental and emotional health outcomes. Finally, communication among adolescents has shifted and become more pervasive through texting, messaging through gaming systems, and messaging on social media sites. This continual access and inlet to the lives of peers can serve as both a source of support and a source of derision and stress. Thus, it is essential for nurses and other healthcare providers to talk with older children and adolescents about the frequency, content, and nature of their digital and social media use and how they maintain their privacy and safety. Equally important, nurses can help families devise strategies and personalized plans for safe and healthy technology use. Race and ethnicity. Race and ethnicity are socially constructed terms used to group together people who share similar characteristics, traditions, or historical experience. Race is a term that groups together people by their outward physical appearance. Ethnicity is a classification aimed at grouping individuals who share common characteristics unique in comparison to others in a society, resulting in a distinctive cultural behavior. Ethnicities may be differentiated from one another by customs and language, and may influence family structure, food preferences, and expressions of emotion. The composition and definition of ethnic groups can be fluid in response to changes in geography, i.e., moving from one country to another. Race and ethnicity influence a family's health when they are used as criteria by which a child or family is discriminated against. There is a significant body of work that describes this. In fact, 100 years of research describe racial gaps in health. Racism remains an important social determinant of health. According to Williams, 2012, for minority or other groups who experience stigmatization, inequalities in healthcare are created by larger inequalities in society, meaning that prevailing social conditions and obstacles to equal opportunities for all influences the health of all individuals. For example, from birth forward, African American and American Indian children have a higher mortality rate than white children in general. There's also a higher death rate for babies of African American and Hispanic women versus white women. Even when controlling for maternal levels of education, the infant mortality rate for college-educated African American women is 2.5 times higher than for Hispanic and white women of similar educational level. These numbers demonstrate that children and families ultimately feel the effects of such health disparities. Children and families may also experience perceived racism, which also has negative consequences. For example, in a study of more than 5,000 fifth graders, 15% of Hispanic youth and 20% of African American youth reported they had experienced racial discrimination. Such experiences were then associated with a higher risk of mental health symptoms. Teens also report racial discrimination through online communities, social networking sites, and texting, which is related to increased anxiety and depression. Poverty. Opportunities to promote health or risks to health often begin in our families, schools, neighborhoods, and places of employment. Thus, to fully promote child health and diminish risks to it, we need to understand how the surrounding contexts and environments are influential. Children are nested within layers of family, peers, school, and community. We can consider the direct impact of these outside systems interacting with the child and family. Equally important, however, is the influence of factors within the socio-political landscape at local, state, regional, national, and international levels. These factors affect the creation of health and social policies that may perpetuate health disparities or make health equity possible. The circumstances into which a child is born can determine the child's exposure to factors that promote or compromise healthy development. For example, adverse events can have long-lasting impacts into adulthood. Layers of the child's surrounding environment that contribute to health inequity fall into socioeconomic, political, and cultural contexts, including local, state, and federal policies, daily living conditions, and the circumstances in which people live, work, and play. Child health disparities are discrepancies that are based in avoidable differences and are concerning because of the immense and foundational development that occurs in early childhood. Health inequities, in a similar vein, are defined as differences in health states between populations that are socially produced and systemic in unequal distribution across populations that are avoidable and unfair. Health follows a social gradient. There are better health outcomes with increased socioeconomic status and further improvements with movements upward in socioeconomic status. Similarly, compromised health outcomes are associated with lower economic status. Inequitable access to services maintains or perpetuates health inequities in early childhood because the children most in need of services are most likely to not receive them. Multi-level, multifactorial responses to address these issues include policies that improve access to high-quality services and connect parents to secure, stable, flexible workplaces. Service systems that deliver inclusive programs rooted in research and evidence, and timely assistance for parents so that they can feel successful in their parenting role. Economy and poverty. A major factor that affects child and family health in the United States is poverty. Nearly 1/5 of all American children live in families with annual incomes below 100% of the federal poverty level for a family of four, approximately $24,600. And almost 1/2 of children live 200% below this federal poverty guideline. Poverty affects children and their families across all geographic areas, including urban, suburban, and rural. Several social factors associated with poverty that can negatively affect child health are family disruption, parental depression, substance abuse, other mental illnesses, unsafe homes or neighborhoods, housing instability, homelessness, decreased educational opportunities, and low parent educational levels and health literacy. Poverty influences these social determinants of health, circumstances, and environments in which people are born, live, work, learn, and play. In turn, these social determinants shape child health in major and lasting ways. Poverty itself is a major cause of acute and chronic stress for adults and children. The daily stressors associated with poverty are overwhelming, and other circumstances, such as trauma or violence, can add to the stress experienced by parents and children. This overwhelming stress can undermine skills in dealing with challenging situations. The stressors associated with poverty can be psychologically and emotionally depleting. Yet supports to deal with this depletion, such as adequate mental health services, high quality and affordable childcare, or social supports, may not be available. Infants and toddlers are more likely to live in poverty than older children. Thus, some of the most profound effects of poverty are demonstrated in young children, such as increased prevalence of low birth weight and infant mortality and delayed language development. These risks can perpetuate other lifetime hazards, such as diminished health status due to chronic illness or compromised academic performance. Underinsurance imposes financial difficulties on families. This reminds us that having insurance does not automatically negate financial distress or impact on families. High out-of-pocket costs, e.g. copays, medications, supplies, and associated costs for transportation to appointments, parking at hospitals, meals while a child is hospitalized, and childcare for siblings contribute to this distress. Parental education. Parental level of education is another important factor when we consider economic influences on child health. Child economic status is directly tied to parental earnings. Parental earnings from employment, in turn, are affected by parental level of education. Income inequality is pervasive and has become worse in recent history. Although some families are catching up on what was lost in the Great Recession of 2008, many of the jobs that could help decrease income inequality require a college degree, and only 1/3 of adults in the United States have such degrees. Thus, many children in the United States are living in families in which parents face employment dissatisfaction and barriers, contributing to stress or negative parental or family outcomes. Although this issue affects children across races, ethnicities, and geographic settings, children of color disproportionately live in homes without sufficient finances. 12% white children versus 36% African American children versus 31% Hispanic children. Gaps in income undermine a family's ability to access social mobility and move permanently out of poverty. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that screening be done at each well visit by asking about ability to meet basic needs such as heat, shelter, and food. To address the issue, the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that pediatric health care providers build on family strengths such as cohesion, humor, support, and spiritual beliefs, and advocate for creation of programs to address the multiple facets of childhood poverty that are rooted in research. Barriers to screening exist, however, and derail providers with the best of intentions. Barriers include not recognizing the impact of poverty or the measurable outcomes associated with it, lack of time, limited and insufficient training in assessment, and limited familiarity with assessment tools, and limited knowledge of available community resources. Pediatric nurses and healthcare providers can initiate surveillance and screening to elicit and address parent concerns, identify risk and protective factors, screen for specific issues, and refer the child and family to the right place with the right services. To address the social determinants of health, screening can be tailored to the most sensitive or sustained issues in the community, to parent sources of concern, and to child developmental stage. Economic barriers impede parents' ability to provide for their children. Thus, pediatric nurses and other healthcare providers must imbue their practice with an understanding of the challenges that families face. Integrate care to minimize the strain of interacting with health and social services, informed by the knowledge that emotional care of the family is within the scope of pediatrics, and minimize the effects of toxic stress through supportive care services that build on family strengths. Land of origin and immigration status. Cultural factors are woven into social, economic, and political influences on child health, including the misconception that children are oblivious to or not deeply affected by the world around them. This perception of children can color governments and policy-making bodies' work on behalf of children and families. In addition, young childhood is often perceived to be in the domain of the home, thus calls for a universal preschool are not heeded. Demographics of the United States are changing, yet race and ethnicity remain important social determinants of health for many children. Children of color are disproportionately represented in impoverished communities and schools, yet they will comprise the majority of children in 13 states by 2020. This demonstrates one way in which a child's chances for thriving depend not only on child, family, and community characteristics, but also on the state in which the child lives because of variation in health and social services available. State policy choices and investments can have a tremendous impact on child health. Considering the broader context of where children and families live, work, and play is complex. We care for children and families who are considered refugees or undocumented immigrants. For these children and families, we must consider not only where they are within the United States and in our particular site for care, but also where they have been and where they have left. Nearly half of the world's displaced people are children, amounting to more than 20 million children. Within this group are both children and families who have fled their home countries and those who are internally displaced within their home country. Nonetheless, these children and their families often experience mental and physical trauma. They may have experienced danger and violence in both staying in their homes and fleeing. For children and families who journey to a new destination, there are dangers along the journey, including inclement weather, discrimination in destination countries, potential loss of loved ones along the journey, further threats to safety in refugee camps, and lack of food and water. Children and adolescents who journey alone face heightened threats of abduction, trafficking, sexual violence, and exploitation and abuse. For nurses caring for children who have arrived in the United States for resettlement, it is important to know that children and families will have already fled one country, arrived in a second country, and could be resettled in yet another country. Thus, trauma and psychological distress may come not only from extraordinary threats of violence, but also from constant disruption to family life. In fact, psychological distress and mental illness are the major causes of disability among refugee children, as they frequently experience post-traumatic stress, grief, anxiety, and depression. In terms of physical health, greatest risks stem from infectious diseases and malnutrition. The leading causes of infectious disease-related death among refugees are tuberculosis, malaria, and intestinal parasites, often due to overcrowding, poor sanitation, or inability to institute standing transmission prevention measures in campsites. Nurses caring for these children and families must keep in mind that their assessment and treatment procedures may need to be accommodated because of trauma and stress that children have already experienced. Nurses must also be aware of signs of exploitation or abuse, indicating that a child or adolescent may be a victim of trafficking, such as elevated fear or unexplained injuries. The process of disentangling the child and family's story may unfold over time after trust has been established. Undocumented immigrants are another group of children and families that may have untoward health outcomes and for whom nurses will provide care. Because of their own or their parents' undocumented status, children may be particularly vulnerable to limited access to health care. Negative health effects are often associated with being an undocumented immigrant and are related to poverty, poor living and working conditions, food insecurity, chronic stress, and ongoing fear of deportation and arrest. Despite the negative health effects, research demonstrates that undocumented immigrants seek health care at lower rates than other groups. Although programs such as Migrant Health Program exist to provide access to low-cost primary care, barriers that families face in accessing this care include language barriers, lack of transportation, difficulty arranging for time off from work, and limited ability to pay. The healthcare system is an important layer of influence in the health of children. Although this can be a site of health promotion, health maintenance, and illness management, it may also erect barriers for families to enact the care prescribed. Although child and family factors accounted for some influence, child care, transportation, and adequate insurance, healthcare system factors had a major impact on completion of referrals. These factors included the ability to get an appointment quickly, the communication style of front desk staff, and interpreter services. Religion and spiritual identity. Religion and spirituality are powerful forces in the lives of individuals, families, and communities. Spirituality and religion are important principles around which families organize their responses to illness, experiences, and life transitions. Indeed, nearly 80% of people report that religion is fairly important to them. The terms, however, are often conflated. Religion and spirituality, although frequently grouped together, denote different entities. Religion is a specific set of beliefs enacted through a practice, religiosity. Spirituality is described as a unique awareness, belief, practice, and experience starting in childhood and is rooted over time. Religion and spirituality are important avenues through which children participate in making meaning of important life events, such as illness in themselves or loved ones, and are shaped by the developmental stage of the child. Furthermore, spiritual assessment is necessary to provide family-centered care that is aligned with spiritual and religious needs. Finally, many regulatory bodies that guide practice, including the American Nurses Association, the International Council of Nurses, and the Joint Commission, call for assessment of and intervention for spiritual concerns. Individual, family, and community experiences of religion and spirituality are interrelated, and children experience them from their own individualized experience as people situated within a community. They also experience what the community as a whole experiences. For example, children whose families practice the Islamic faith experience religion within the home and what their own relationship to Allah means. They also experience religion from the perspective of being part of a community when attending mosque or practicing collective prayer. They also might experience being part of a faith community that may face stigma or bias, or whose tenets are misunderstood. In many instances, religion and spirituality propel people toward virtuous actions and behaviors. Most of the world's religions share a common thread of upholding humility, charity, and honesty. When individuals become parents, they may connect to their religion as a guide in raising their children, to enhance their well being, and to provide a moral and social context for their child rearing. Although parents may use an approach to parenting that is informed by their religion and spirituality, how this is enacted or operationalized varies dramatically because of variability in beliefs about parenting goals and roles, the parent-child relationship, and child discipline and punishment. In addition, parents' spirituality, religious practices, and beliefs are a guiding force on their children. Thus, with respect to family-based spirituality care, comprehensive, collaborative spiritual care is important in addressing the spiritual needs of children who are ill and acknowledges the interrelationships of child, parent, and family spirituality. In the context of pediatric illness, this is also important because children and families are often isolated from their faith communities and experience crises for which they have no prior experience to draw on or that cause existential questioning and meaning seeking. Children and families receiving a new or life-threatening diagnosis often experience fear and anxiety and may benefit from healthcare providers helping them connect to those spiritual and religious practices that are important to them. For example, nurses can help families find a suitable place to pray and ask families which of their healthcare practices may be most helpful in addressing their spiritual needs. Children who experience major life transitions, such as being diagnosed with a life-threatening illness or the death of a loved one, often experience spirituality as a source of hope and comfort that promotes their resilience and helps them discern the meaning of the life transition for them. Yet there is a paucity of research on children's spiritual development in a contemporary context. Children, adolescents, and young adults have unique spiritual needs related to their developmental stage. For example, adolescents and young adults may be at greater risk for spiritual distress because of their more sophisticated understanding of the impact and risk of illness. Diagnosis of a life-threatening illness can cause an internal spiritual struggle and questioning of beliefs. They may engage less with institutionalized religion, but still use spirituality as a means of finding meaning and connecting with family and loved ones. By asking about and facilitating access to spiritual care, nurses can help build on child and family strengths as they deal with critical juncture in their lives. Other key practices include avoiding assumptions about spiritual beliefs and practices, asking how the child and family understand the illnesses or life's events' spiritual impact on the affected individual, other family members, and the family unit, taking time to explore one's own spiritual and religious perspective so that one's values can be clarified and judgments evaluated, active listening that is compassionate and keeps the child's spiritual needs at the center, without false reassurances, and incorporating arts or storytelling into spiritual assessment and intervention. Providing space in the physical environment for children to participate in their spirituality in ways that bring them comfort and provide for meaning-making opportunities is essential, as it can provide a glimpse into their spiritual distress and sources of hope. For example, a provider can elicit an adolescent's narrative of his or her illness situation or life event and invite parents or caregivers to listen and share their reactions to promote family connection and communication. Nurses can also develop skills and access training to help them feel prepared for when children ask spiritually oriented questions. For example, Farrell, Wittenberg, Batista, and colleagues, 2016, queried children's palliative care nurses and found that children facing life-threatening illnesses most often ask questions about the time-limited nature of their illness, why this has happened to them, and why their deity would allow this to happen to them. They found that children often described the afterlife without fear, sadness, or pain, and with angels or predeceased loved ones caring for them there. The authors called for nurses to recognize their ideal position to facilitate spiritual care and communication between child and parents, and child, family, and chaplain or some other spiritual care provider. Ill children in particular have spiritual care needs that must be acknowledged. Key components of spiritual care that all nurses can provide are supportive, caring presence to the child and family, and taking time to reflect on one's own spirituality or beliefs in order to meet the needs of others. Nurses need not share the belief system of a child or family to sit with and support them in times of spiritual questioning or reflection. Nurses do need skills in supportive therapeutic listening, answering children's questions about death and the afterlife, facilitating discussion between parents and children, and preserving mindfulness in family relationships. Regarding physical health, religion has demonstrated mixed effects, with positive effects resulting from the emphasis on healthy behaviors and respect for others. Religiosity and spirituality have been associated with adolescent substance use and older age at sexual debut. Conversely, deleterious effects may be associated with some religions that are more authoritarian and prohibit healthcare interventions, such as cases of religiously motivated medical neglect, when a child suffers injury or dies because parents did not seek treatment for a particular ailment, or when immunizations or screenings are declined. In addition, adolescents who identified as highly religious were less likely to use contraception at sexual debut, despite being older than non-religious adolescents, putting them at risk for unplanned pregnancy or sexually transmitted infections. With respect to mental and emotional health, connection to religion or spirituality has been associated with less adolescent depression, anxiety, and suicidality, as well as lower rates of criminal or delinquent behavior. However, religion or spirituality can contribute to psychological distress, and youth are subject to negative relationships or experiences that are imbued with demands and criticism. Thus, the social context in which the religion is practiced may be more important than a religion itself. However, conflicts can arise between religion and healthcare, and parental religious objections have been a major focus of literature on family spirituality versus other forms of engagement. For example, the American Academy of Pediatrics 2013 cites the intersection of religion, spirituality, and healthcare as potentially harmful to children based on situations in which parents refuse medical care for their children and there are religious exemptions to child abuse and neglect laws. Although parents' refusal of medical care for their children falls under the scope of parental authority, the child's best interest is the priority. Failure to provide essential health care is increasingly viewed as a form of neglect. Religions and spiritual traditions vary in the depth and nature of treatment. They refuse from refusal of all treatment to refusal of select interventions or therapeutics, such as blood products. Pediatric healthcare organizations such as the American Academy of Pediatrics 2013 argue that free exercise of religion should be balanced against protecting children from harm. For example, in a case where parents and healthcare providers differ on the proposed benefit or burden of a treatment, and the primary benefit is spiritual or religious, children's future ability to decide the issue for themselves should be protected and privileged. In addition, the Supreme Court has argued that the free exercise of religion does not include the liberty to subject communities or children to disease, or children in particular to diminished health or death. These arguments and considerations become murky when the conditions are not life-threatening or when the proposed treatment has significant adverse effects or the limited efficacy. Negative psychological effects must be considered. Complicating this debate is variation in religious exemption laws across states, creating additional uncertainty among families, healthcare providers, and child protection agencies about when and why to intervene and potential penalties. Thus, many healthcare providers may perceive religion and spirituality as a negative influence in children's lives, believe that such statutes should be abolished, as children may be at greater risk and receive differential care across state lines. These arguments are compelling, and the welfare of children should be prioritized. However, we must walk this line carefully, as healthcare providers are often in positions of power, and families may feel vulnerable, limit their sharing with providers, and ultimately withdraw from care. This hampers spiritual assessment and diminishes communication between child parent and healthcare providers. Overall, pediatric healthcare providers engage in a limited manner with parents around their spirituality, even if the child is engaged spiritually. Although many healthcare providers support the value of religion or spirituality, there is limited discussion in clinical practice, limited assessment and inquiry into family spiritual beliefs and needs, and limited training in nursing and medical schools on how to conduct such assessment. These limitations create an environment in which limited spiritual and religious interventions that may diminish sorrow and provide comfort and solace can be provided. For example, evaluation and intervention around spiritual beliefs could be helpful for a child who has lost a sibling. Care must be taken, though, to ensure that the right person is available to conduct spiritual care interventions. For example, trained spiritual counselor or chaplain with expertise in children's spirituality and experience with religion who can skillfully disentangle spiritual from psychological or emotional issues or apparent spiritual perspectives from those of the child. Indeed, assessing and addressing child and family spirituality have been incorporated into the standards of various pediatric nursing organizations and other healthcare organizations, e.g., American Academy of Pediatrics. Social care acknowledges the transcendent dimensions of life and reflects the reality of the patient. A focus and tiered screening, as proposed by Taylor, Peterson, and colleagues, 2015, allows for all children to be screened for spiritual distress and identify immediate needs for support, to conducting in-depth spiritual assessment or accessing someone who can. The mnemonic belief also allows for a guided assessment. Belief system, ethics or values, lifestyle, involvement, education, future. Religion can influence community standards and norms, although context is key when we consider how religion exerts an effect on children and families. For example, the effect of religion or spirituality may be more pronounced in an isolated rural area versus a major metropolitan area with a more heterogeneous population. Cultural humility and healthcare providers' contribution. Healthcare providers and the wider healthcare community must reassert the significance of equity, fairness, and caring as the instrumental building blocks of a strong, high-quality, and transformed healthcare system. One way to get this point across is through teaching and coaching trainees across healthcare disciplines to be more engaged in understanding the social determinants of health, their impact and roots, and how to counteract their negative effects. Bedencourt, Corbett, and Bondurek, 2017, argue that although the concept and practice have limitations, the goal of cultural competence is to improve the ability of healthcare providers and healthcare systems to communicate effectively with and provide quality healthcare to patients from diverse social backgrounds. Effective communication with patients and families is critical to positive health outcomes, yet many trainees do not feel prepared to engage with patients, families whose backgrounds are different than their own. It also recognizes the dynamic nature of culture and the influence of context, place, and time. We must also recognize that culture is not only race and ethnicity, but also social class, age, sexual orientation, sexuality, gender, ability, professional discipline, among other things. Thus, all of us will be on the receiving and giving ends of care from and for people who do not inhabit the same space as us, yet we can connect on the desire to help and be helped and to minimize suffering. For Rhonda, Baptiste, Reinhold, and colleagues, 2016, describe the attributes or characteristics of cultural humility as openness, self-awareness, egolessness, supportive interactions, self-reflection, and critique. They found that the consequences of practicing cultural humility as published in studies or practice guides were mutual empowerment, partnership, respect, optimal care, and lifelong learning. Clinical encounters. Thus, transformational learning environments that can shape students' perspectives and make them aware of power imbalances and inequity in healthcare can promote humility in future healthcare encounters. Although it is imperative to have tools to develop one's presence of mind and to assess one's own values, it is also helpful to have concrete questions and methods with which to elicit a patient's or family's health beliefs or customs, As we have seen, it is not helpful to demonstrate competence by lumping a group of people together and applying an assumed set of beliefs to them, such as Hispanics have strong family support, as these generalizations can become stereotypical and not illuminate what is important for a particular child and family in a particular context. Thus, it is helpful to have a broad understanding of what health beliefs are and how to elicit them. Religion and culture can influence the ways in which children, youth, and their families interact with healthcare providers and engage with the healthcare system. Various avenues for this influence include health beliefs, e.g., children should not know the severity of their illness, health customs, e.g., care of the dead, ethnic customs, e.g., gender roles and division of labor, religious beliefs, e.g., use of blood products, dietary customs, e.g., maintaining a kosher diet, and interpersonal customs, e.g., how children address parents or how touch is used in communication. Questions to begin this conversation can start with the following. Is there anything you would like for me to know about your child or your family so that I can take the best possible care of you all? Can you tell me about your condition, your child's condition? Or do you have any special beliefs or things you do or people you talk to when it comes to your child's health? These example questions are open-ended and can be adapted to anyone the nurse is caring for at any time in any given location or context.